Hello and welcome to Move the Line. I'm Ryan Noonan here for some NFL draft discussion with my friends Connor Allen, Scott Smith. Both these gentlemen recently have put out some new mock drafts as we get close here. What are we, 2 weeks away? It's like it's coming. It's here,
on the dot.
Right? On the dot, 2 weeks. So what's going on, Connor? How are you?
Good. Yeah, fired some Masters lineups at advice from you, Ron, and Andy. So hopefully cash some early checks there to just roll it all right into the draft. That would be awesome to just literally just take it all and then put it more on draft props.
Generational wealth opportunities flowing in on Friday night when those made the cut parlays come pouring in. Scott, what's up with you, buddy? How we doing?
A little under the weather. My daughter had surgery last week, so I missed the show, but she's doing better getting back on the mend. So hopefully get through this week. I got a couple of MMA shows Friday and Saturday night I got to go to, and big weekend. But hey, let's get it. We're getting closer to the draft, so ready to get it.
Love it. All right, let's get into some news since the last time we were here a week ago. This is obviously a very fluid time of year. You're starting to get a little bit more information, get a sense of what these teams are looking to do. I still don't think we have a great sense of what's happening in number 2. It feels more and more likely that one is, off the board. There's really no discussion. It's Cam Ward at this point. If you have the ability to pretty liquid and you get a bunch down, feels like Cam Ward's probably a pretty good bet to go number 1, Connor. Number 2 felt like we were moving away from Shedeur Sanders. That was getting really long. There's just like, where does Shedeur fall? We get a little bit of reporting that Shedeur may be still in play. The market very much wants to tell you that it's, the Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter discussion is also started to lean more towards Hunter in this scenario. Where are we at in the last week on the Browns at number 2?
Yeah, Travis Hunter, we're looking at it's like a minus 300 favorite now to go number 2. We're seeing Abdul Carter right around the 2-1 range. He was once minus 300. And again, most of these things have shifted based on every single Schefter report. Schefter opened up 8 weeks ago saying that Cleveland's for sure going to pick quarterback because they have to. Then 3 weeks later says things are trending towards Abdul Carter. That gets blown out of proportion and is quote tweeted by the aggregators is like, the Browns are going to pick Abdul Carter. So then Abdul Carter becomes minus 300. Now we have him trying to give a million caveats on like what he said, still ends up getting taken out of context of like the things are going towards Travis Hunter now. So I think the most likely right now it is probably Travis Hunter. I think Travis Hunter also makes the most sense for them from a team building perspective for a lot of reasons, and is a dynamic player. Like all of those reasons make sense. Abdul Carter never really made a ton of sense in my mind because they have one of the worst offenses in the league. They can't move the ball. He doesn't solve the quarterback position, the wide receiver position, or the corner position for them. So I think there's a lot of reasons not to take Abdul Carter for the Browns. That leaves us with Travis Hunter. Now, I still think there's an outside chance that Shedeur Sanders is the pick. We know that they like Shedeur Sanders. Like I feel very good that they like him. It's just a matter of whether they can stomach picking him over someone like Carter or like Travis Hunter. So at the end of the day, I mean, I think we've seen owners and we've seen teams do crazier things. If you don't have a position on Shedeur Sanders, it's like 17-1 on FanDuel to go second overall. Like put a little sprinkle there, especially if you're deep on any Hunter or Carter stuff. Like it's worth the bet because all it takes is the owner saying the week of like, we don't have a quarterback. We need a quarterback. We're picking Shedeur Sanders. I don't care. The value sucks, but we need a quarterback. Like it happens all the time. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I'm not ready to add anything to Hunter, but I think that's probably, I think it's probably a stay away until we get a little bit closer.
Yeah, not a lot of, I mean, you saw some quotes too from Stefanski. Like they're not anti-Shedeur Sanders, right? It's like, we like the young man, real smart, like his process, like it's good, seems like a good fit, like his process. It's not like there's anything tea leaf reading there. So yeah, 17 on FanDuel is a pretty good price there. Scott, you have Travis Hunter going 2, then you did mock Shedeur Sanders 3 to the Giants. Talk to us a little bit about what you're doing here with 2 and 3 and your thought process.
Yeah, it's just, look, when it comes to Adam Schefter, especially this year, he has been all over the place throughout the last couple of weeks, and normally he's a little bit on it, but it's the market's moving, information, rumors are all moving. I still kind of fall into the camp with the Giants that neither one of the quarterbacks, Jameis Winston or Russell Wilson, is the answer. Now, I do get where they're at. They need to, that coaching staff and that front office, I think both need to save their jobs this year. Is Abdul Carter going to be more of the player that could possibly do that, or is Shedeur Sanders going to be that person? it's a quarterback driven league. I just kind of lean that direction for right now. The other information that I've been receiving is that if it's not the Giants and it's not Cleveland, I don't think it's going to be the Saints. The people in the know that are down here that are heavily connected with the front office and the Saints don't seem to think that they're high on Shedeur Sanders, that they've got a couple of other players that they're high on. So if he makes it past the Saints, where does he fall? A lot of people are just kind of putting a default at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh did just have a top 30 visit scheduled with Shedeur Sanders. So it's getting interesting to see what happens if it's not Cleveland at 2 and it's not New York at 3.
Last week, Solak tried to make the case a little bit for Seattle at 18, which I thought was interesting there too. So yeah, it's definitely a very difficult thing to kind of pinpoint where he ends up landing, and you kind of get the scenarios where you try to have to think about teams trading back in Connor into the first round, which gets really dicey.
Yeah, I think something to add to the Giants though too would be, so like Jordan Renan came out today and said like he heard before the owners meeting like, hey, I don't know if they love Shedeur Sanders, the Giants, and then the owners meeting, you know, I believe it was the GM, Joe Shane, was talking about like, yeah, we don't really have to take quarterback at 3. Maybe that's all just posturing. I don't know. Like that could all be the case, but he basically was piecing together like he had heard from multiple different people, and then publicly they're saying it. Generally, that's been my barometer of like how real something is for the most part, is like if I hear it from someone or a couple people like privately in different places, and then it kind of starts getting some public steam, to me, that's usually like the best indicator of something being true. So I kind of believe it at this point. So I probably won't be mocking Shedeur 3. And to Scott's point, I had him at 9 initially on my third mock, and I had to change that, you know, pretty quickly because again, that's just hearing he's not going to go 9 basically. So he could still, I guess it's possible, but you know, it's just not seem like the most likely outcome here. So yeah, I think it's going to be a team trading back in. It gets really messy to mock or figure out. So I think taking some long shots could make sense.
Scott, with 4 New England, you have obviously Shedeur going in the top 3, which is, I think, a pretty great scenario for New England. They'd be, I think, happy to take Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter if one were available. A lot more discussion as of late. If you look to, you know, shout out to Vegas Refund, you know, all the work that he does tracking mock drafts. Pretty consistent drumbeat now of offensive linemen going there, and even more so specifically Will Campbell seems to have leapfrogged Armin Membu to be the first offensive lineman in terms of where that's kind of shifted there a little bit. What are your thoughts there in terms of Membu, Campbell, or anything that you've heard there that kind of led to that decision?
Yeah, I feel pretty comfortable that if Shedeur Sanders goes top 3, I think that the Patriots have a real decision to make, and it's between Abdul Carter and Will Campbell. I tend to like Membu a little bit better, but all the information coming out of New England is that they tend to favor Will Campbell over Membu, and they feel secure that he's going to be a left tackle and that he's going to be able to play that position. So really you have to kind of decide, and I think those 2 players are kind of where they're looking. If Abdul Carter goes 3 to New York and Shedeur does indeed fall, Will Campbell's definitely going to be the pick, in my opinion, just based upon the drumbeat that you're hearing here recently.
Connor, we can get great info out of New England last year. We started the quarterback discussions, got a little wonky. We didn't know what was happening there. Obviously a shift in front office. Maybe some older New England sources have dried up for some folks just because there's discussion. We've heard Vrabel come out and say we believe that Will Campbell's a left tackle. Isn't necessarily a signal to me that they think Will Campbell is the best offensive lineman. It's just interesting that feels like, is there something that I missed that was reported there other than that? Because I'm kind of surprised that it feels a little clear cut to the masses right now that it's Campbell over Membu.
Yeah, I think so. You know, last year, obviously, we had I would say, pretty big whiff on the New England quarterback situation to some extent. And it's interesting because there's other people saying opposite things. I just didn't know the other people as well, and saying it was for sure Drake May, and they've said that for a little while. And so, you know, I think that people who are more trustworthy have been just leaning towards Will Campbell at this point. So, you know, that's, you know, based on my understanding, like I played a little bit at open personally, like at like plus 400 or something like that, just based on that. Now we're down to minus 110. I don't know if I love it at minus 110 for maybe the 4th pick. We're seeing even minus 130 at some spots. Like that to me, I think Shedeur Sanders is still in some of the equation to some extent. If we assume that he's not, like, I would feel pretty comfortable betting Will Campbell for it minus 110. But if he is, like, I mean, they're not picking Will Campbell over Carter, I don't think, or Travis Hunter. So, yeah, I have a tough time getting there, to be honest, at current prices.
Yeah, I don't think they would either. I think it's still best player available. Jags, Mason Graham, probably one of the more common, team player situations that we have. Scott, you didn't deviate there at all. Anything to expand on with Jags at 5?
Yeah, I've actually been waffling a little bit on the Jaguars. I think the Jaguars are kind of down to 3 players, and Mason Graham's kind of the safe play, but Jalen Walker is really a player that's starting to get a lot of buzz moving up. And some people have even mentioned him there at 4 to the Patriots. I haven't gotten there yet, but I think Jalen Walker could be firmly in play. I think if Will Campbell's there, Will Campbell would be in play as well. So the 3 players that I'm kind of looking at is Mason Graham, Jalen Walker, and Will Campbell. And at this point, it actually seems like Mason Graham may be slipping a little bit. I don't think he's going to drop far. I don't think he'd get past, say, the Jets maybe. But I think those are the 3 players that are firmly there. And right now I have Mason Graham.
Jalen Walker, 9-1 right now to be the 5th overall pick, or plus 650 to be a top 5 pick. If you're interested in that, I go back and forth on it, but I don't think it's bad. At that price, you can tell me on a lot of things. So,
yeah, it's interesting from just a team building perspective because they have, a couple of solid off-ball linebackers and a couple of solid edge guys. It's kind of really all they really do have. And I know Campbell can swing and play both, and that could work. Again, contracts, like, you're not drafting a guy just for 2025, you're drafting for, future years as well. So, sometimes we can get locked into current needs and stuff like that. So teams might see something differently. They might know interior, hey, we're not bringing that guy back. So there are things like that that could be a little bit more, wishy-washy than we know. So yeah, not a bad sprinkle currently. I don't think that's a bad look there. All right, 6, a little bit more drumbeat as of late. The Raiders have been a hard team to peg with, just obviously a series of needs. There's the apparent Michigan connection with Will Johnson, cornerback out of Michigan with, obviously Tom Brady. Jack Jones has been released recently as well. Just really weak position, getting weaker there. Scott, anything to expand on with the Raiders and who else was in consideration there?
Yeah, for a while it's been Jeanty that's been kind of mocked there, and he's kind of the majority pick. But I think when you look at it and them cutting their top cornerback, I was trying to trade him, not really being able to get rid of him, and then you also kind of have the Travion Henderson drumbeat as well there, and possibly being a pick in the late first round or second round if they stick. I think the Raiders have options at running back, whereas they don't necessarily have as good an option as they are, trying to fill a cornerback or even another key piece. So, in circles, Will Johnson's kind of getting a little more play, especially to the Raiders. You've got Charlie and Walter both been hitting on it for a while, and a few other people are starting to swing that way as well. So I just did something different besides putting Jeanty, because I've been hearing a little bit more about Jeanty in some other places. So I want Will Johnson to the Raiders.
Connor, anything to expand on the Raiders?
Yeah. So Noonan, I have a question though for you as a ball knower. I've heard a lot of other ball knowers think that Will Johnson sucks because his 2024 tape is not very good. Amico is on this train. You got a couple other people are on this train. They're just like, basically being like, I think it was maybe McShay was talking about it. He was just like ripping Will Johnson for like half of a podcast lately. And so, I mean, he's like bigger. He's not, huge. He's not super lengthy. He's lengthy, but he's not like, doesn't have a crazy arms or anything like that. That being said, he played, like you mentioned, he didn't play a lot of man. Patrick Graham's defense, essentially played like, I would say slightly above average amount of zone, but I assume Pete Carroll's going to come in and also have an impact on that, who again, historically plays like cover 3, a lot of zone. Like I would assume that that's probably going to sway towards whatever Pete Carroll wants to do. And Patrick Graham's going to be like, hey, all right, sounds good. So I think that there's obviously a fit there. Also, the whole thing of Pete Carroll drafting the Seahawks. Who is your boy? Who they picked 5th overall? It was
Witherspoon.
Like a shocking pick. Yep, exactly. Witherspoon. So I don't know. I think that there's connections there in their cornerback room. And again, it's like pathetic. Like it's like literally the worst cornerback room, I think, in the league on paper. So I don't know, like talking about 7-1. I think Jeanty makes a lot of sense too for a lot of other reasons. Like I'm not saying that Will Johnson's like an awesome pick, but he's 7-1 and Ashton Jeanty's like, again, minus 140. So
yeah. I mean, I'm not sure what the need. I mean, there's definitely a team need in terms of stylistic fit. I mean, people used to think that they would only take, big corners because he had some success with big corners in the Legion of Boom days. But then Witherspoon's not of that ilk. He's a little bit on the smaller side and, definitely a dog and willing to put his nose in it. But yeah, I mean, you would think that Tom Brady would probably have access to, a little bit more insight on the coaching and all those different things that he was asked to do in Michigan, why things went the way they did, if they were comfortable with that. That would be of interest. We've also had a lot of people that think, Barron's pretty good, but again, that's another thing that Solak last week is not a big Barron guy. And I, respect Ben's ball knowing opinion as well. So yeah, I mean, the Raiders are interesting. Again, they have so many needs. It's really just, they can go best player available. They need pretty much everything. So it gets a little bit confusing. Next we have the Jets, just kind of a louder drumbeat there with obviously some right tackle needs. Membu going there, Scott, for your draft. We've seen that pretty consistently as of late. Again, I think another team that can go a lot of different ways, but based on some stuff we've heard from that team front office, it does make a lot of sense. Was it a pretty easy Membu slot in there for you? Oh, I think you muted, Scott.
I think he fits in well there at right tackle. They just struggled all last year with protecting Aaron Rodgers. And I think when you bring in Justin Fields, if you want him to succeed, I think you need to give him a clean pocket and give him as good of a fresh start as you can there with the Jets. So I think Membu, with his upside and his athleticism, makes a lot of sense for a team that kind of struggled over the last few years to protect their quarterbacks.
Connor, any thoughts on the Jets? Obviously, I mean, offensive line's a need. That receiving room's pretty terrible. They want to sell you on their tight end room being okay, but I don't know. They can go a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I think that they go a line here. I mean, there was some, I think Daigle had in his mock Kelvin Banks going 7. I've had Membu. I feel pretty good about them taking one of those guys. Just like the only way that they're going to win games this year is going to be like bolstering the offensive line, Justin Fields, Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, running the ball like 35 times a game, and then just praying their defense can hold up with the new defensive coordinator, or just Aaron Glenn just like throwing crazy blitzes the entire game because they just didn't really play all that well after Saleh left. And I think Saleh could have been a difference maker there. So yeah, I expect them to go super run heavy. And I think that solidifying the trenches and kind of adding to that is a pretty important piece of that. So I think that it'll be Membu. I mean, Banks is like 16-1, depending on where you look. I don't know. I mean, I think it's worth a stab at that price. I took a little bit this morning just for fun. And then, yeah, I think that, I mean, if Mason Graham was there, maybe they do that too. But again, Mason Graham is, I kind of think, kind of a lot of outs, like 5, 6, 7. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like it seems like there's a lot of outs here in the top 10.
I like the Banks call, right? Because if New England goes Membu and everyone misread that situation, and the Jets are maybe a little bit clearer on Banks than they are on Campbell, like that feels like something we don't know the answer to, and it's probably not priced correctly at 16-1, right? So there are lots of different ways where that is probably some good leverage, right? We're 2 weeks out, starting to get a little bit more information, but it's still okay to like play off of a little bit of market uncertainty based off of like feeling like there's market certainty, right? Like that's a great, example of kind of leveraging that a little bit. So good call.
Totally. No, I think that goes back to like when we talked about the whole like Schefter swinging things of like, oh, Abdul Carter now like shaving to be the favorite. Like Travis Hunter was 13-1 to go second overall after that tweet, which I bet a little bit. I mean, not enough, but obviously I bet a little bit just in case. And now he's minus 300. So I think, yeah, playing into uncertainty still. We're 2 weeks out. Even, I mean, the day of, there's still gonna be plenty of uncertainty because as things shake out, like you said, if the Patriots don't go Campbell and they go Membu, like, do the Jets really want Will Campbell? Is that not? We don't know. I mean, it could be Banks. It could be, well, I think it'd probably be Banks or Will Campbell at that point, but who knows? So, and I think the same thing kind of goes with Ashton Jeanty, like you talked about. Like, if he doesn't go 6, where does he go, right? Because then there's some longer prices on 9, a decent one on 10, and then I don't know if he doesn't go. I would be really shocked if the Bears passed on him, to be honest, at this point. Like that would be pretty surprising to me.
Yeah, it does feel more and more like that's the case. Jalen Walker 8 to Carolina, Scott, talking about the fit with Everose 3-4. Obviously, a team that was absolutely abysmal up front last year. A lot of injuries, but also just a lot of talent lacking too. Same thing. They were the bad linebacker core to start the season, and they had cluster injuries. We got into a list of dudes like they got into like linebacker 6, 7 starting games at the end of last year. Was a pretty weak position, and we know Walker's ability to kind of swing both ways there and be able to play off ball, play on the edge is pretty important there too. Any thoughts on Carolina there at 8?
Yeah, I think Walker is a good fit there. The only other player that I've really heard them connected with is Mikael Williams, his teammate there at Georgia. If Walker were to go earlier than where Carolina, I think Carolina is a team that you could possibly see even trade back a little bit, especially for a team that might want to come up and hop in front of the Saints, whether that's Chicago for Jeanty or a team that wants to come up for Shedeur Sanders possibly. I think there's a lot of outs there for Carolina, and so if it's not Jalen Walker, I think things get kind of dicey as far as like what you're betting on.
Yeah. Any thoughts there, Carolina, Scott, or Connor? I mean, obviously, like, another team is just pretty terrible. They can go tight ends, build off of, what happened last year. I've heard a lot about, Canales talking about, I want to run the football, I want to stop the run, I want to be multiple at tight ends. It could be a sneaky spot for Tyler Warren, but it's a team that needs a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I was reading something today. I think it was from Coach Speak Index about how Canales talked about like tight ends a bunch and how like his offense is super tight end friendly. So I hadn't really left my mind open to that, to be honest, because I kind of thought like, well, they kind of got the passing game working at the end of last year. Like maybe they're going to go with defense because their defense needs a little bit more help. And then they're, maybe a well-rounded team. I mean, if they had Tyler Warren, like that, he could be awesome in that offense with Canales kind of scheming that up, be like a much more legitimate playmaker than, Xavier Legette. I was not a fan of that pick at all. Maybe Eric Eager gets in the GM's ears and is like, we got to pick Tyler Warren. He could play, any position for us. So I don't know. I think that's kind of an interesting one. What are the odds there? I honestly haven't looked at it today. I was literally reading this like, I don't know, maybe an hour before we got on here. Because there's probably a Tyler Warren to be drafted by market. 60. Oh no, okay, no, that was Ashton Jeanty. I was like, holy shit. 20-1 for the Panthers to draft Tyler Warren.
It's better than Panthers to take a tight end first, right? Because
yeah,
that to me sounds like Tyler Warren and not Colston Loveland in terms of like the fit. If you were to go tight end, right? Like more of a guy that you could put in line that can block and be a little bit more multiple. Whereas I think the league kind of sees Loveland as more of that big slot type of player. I don't hate that. And sprinkles.
Yeah, 20-1. Like I think part of the thing is too is like he's gonna be there. So like probably. Well, like I would say he's probably gonna be there, and so they're gonna have a real decision on their hands if it's. Say Jalen Walker goes before, or maybe they don't like Jalen Walker or don't view that as like a position need, or like it's like Tyler Warren or Mikael Williams. Like should probably be drafting Tyler Warren.
Yeah. All right, Scott, New Orleans. You went with Ashton Jeanty. It's something that Connor shouted out, I don't know, a month and a half ago at this point, and when he was, 25-1 or whatnot. Get some nice CLV there, and there seems to be a little bit more of a drumbeat. It's so interesting to me with the Saints because they have so many needs. Salary cap is such an issue. How do we land on Jeanty to the Saints?
It's just really local buzz here that I've heard from some people that I trust. The two players that I keep hearing that the Saints absolutely love is one is Jeanty and the other one is the player that we just talked about in Tyler Warren at tight end. They signed Juwan Johnson to basically $10 million a year. I thought that was too much, but I think that their thought process with Tyler Warren is that he could open up and allow them to use Johnson more in a slot type of position. But I think when it comes to Jeanty, I think you start to look at how up in age Kamara is getting, and they kind of struggled to consistently run the ball last year. My understanding when it comes to some other positions, specifically offensive line, is that they're not really high on trying to move around some of the players that they have in Fuaga and Trevor Penning. Penning was a bust up until last year, until they were kind of able to get him settled at right tackle. So they're a little hesitant to go that route, which kind of excludes some of the other offensive linemen out of my consideration here at this point. And I just think when you start to look at it with some of the issues they have on offense, and we talked about Jeanty basically, changing the identity of an offensive football team for whoever drafts them, whether it be the Raiders here or, whether it be the Saints or, even Chicago, with the new coaching staff they have coming in, I think 6, 9, and 10 are all real considerations. And if he gets past those 3 teams, it's kind of hard to really figure out where to slot him.
Yeah, it's a little tricky. Yeah, he is an important one to go off of. Connor, I know you'd love to see this. Anything to expand on here with the Saints?
No, I mean, still 16-1 on 365, which, I've been priming my account gracefully for all of March Madness.
Yes.
So we are, I've been just ripping money line parlays for the last month. And it's good. They're letting me get down to like enough, at least to, have some fun. Not, I haven't been pushing the limit too much, but, enough to have some fun. So still 16-1 there. I think anything above 10-1 is honestly great value because, again, it's like Tyler Warren. He's going to be there. There's plenty of connections between Kellen Moore and him and what they want to do. Do they have plenty of other holes? Absolutely. Like they have so many other holes, but it could make sense.
Bears at 10, real tricky. I just want to put out there that there was a recent mock draft. I don't know if it was Walter or Charlie that landed Kenneth Grant at 10 to the Bears. Just want to put that out there. Reputable source. So be careful there. But again,
check the watch.
Head on a swivel.
26 minutes in, Kenneth Grant.
Head on a swivel, Connor. You just never know. But Scott, we're at the Bears. I mean, we're like, it could be a Jeanty landing spots. People are talking about running back being the spot for them too, where it's like you're seeing maybe Hampton be as early as 10 of the Bears. We've seen Tyler Warren at the Bears. You went offensive line. Again, that was obviously one of the bigger needs coming in. Did a great job addressing the interior offensive line early in free agency. Have a couple of young tackles. I think Braxton Jones is coming up though. So how did you land on Will Campbell there at 10?
I really just think Chicago would run the card up there if Jeanty is on the board. I think they absolutely take him. I think they even look at trying to move up in front of the Saints if he's available to go ahead and take him as well. With him off the board, the 2 players that were kind of in consideration is, again, Tyler Warren was one. I haven't really looked into the Kenneth Grant situation and kind of figuring that out. But I just really landed on best player available and them trying to build around and protect their young quarterback. But like I said, I think for this offense and what they would want to do, I think Jeanty is kind of their primary focus. And we've had some pretty good luck the last couple of years keying in on Chicago's picks and with some of the sources we have. So as it gets closer to the draft, I think we'll be able to key in and really try to figure out who they're going to get. But right now it's a little bit up in the air. And so it's just really building around that quarterback.
Yeah. Connor, where are you on the Bears?
Yeah, I mean, from what I heard initially was like, all right, well, they want to build the offensive line out. And then if they do that, they're probably not going to go offensive line and they're going to go with, a Jeanty would be like ideal for them. So if he's there, I'm pretty sure that they're going to pick him, which again, I don't think is that bold to say. If he's not there, I just haven't heard much else because I like the last time I heard anything was a while ago and, things have just been a little bit tighter this year. So it's been a little bit tougher. There's always like, if I look back at kind of some of their options, they've always kind of liked like some of these like random toolsy kind of guys that like as their secondary option. So like think about like Darnell Wright was picked 10, like he was not really the favorite heading in. Roma Dunze was obviously I think it's kind of like Jeanty. It's like if Rome was there, they're going to pick Rome. If he's not there, like, I heard that it was going to be one of like Byron Murphy or Jared Verse. So like, again, guys that weren't necessarily thought of as the 10th overall pick, but polls loved. So in that kind of mindset and framework, like it wouldn't surprise me to see any of these random defensive guys kind of sneak into the conversation. I mean, I don't know. Could it be a Michael Williams? I guess that wouldn't be that surprising. Like, did they want to add another corner? I'm not really so sure. I think it would probably be more of like somewhere along the defensive line.
I agree with that. There's a clip. I forget where I saw it, but I saw it this week with Poles at the combine and kind of talking to his staff. But like, we have to do a really great job at blocking out the noise of where mock drafts are going to tell you the guys are going to go or supposed to go or something like that, right? So, that kind of is in line with what you're talking about, Connor. Like they might, maybe be kind of just staying in their own process in terms of player evals, big board. They're not getting into this like jockeying position based off of all the nonsense that we're doing and the stuff that we're trying to kind of go through, right? So they're very much in line. And that sounds kind of like how you would even land on a Darnell Wright as early as they did, is that kind of that process continued to fold out there. So interesting. Definitely a team to watch. I mean, defensive line makes a ton of sense if Jeanty's not there. Like I'm joking about Kenneth Grant, but just a kind of a bit at this point to work in. It's a massive need for them, right? So that might be a little bit early for them, but in terms of like, if I look at that roster, if you could plug in an awesome interior defensive lineman, that seems like a great fit for the 2025 Bears.
Yeah, I think who is it? Ben Devine. He's like a Bears kind of beat reporter / like, I don't know, insider, whatever he refers to himself as, but he does report really well on the Bears. And I think he said something about how, Chicago views defensive tackle as a much bigger need than defensive end and could consider trading up from 39. I mean, like, I don't know, like maybe that's at 10. I don't know. Like that's an option if they view that to be the case, or they kick some of their. They have a couple like guys who I think can play like both. So I don't know. Like it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. All right, they're an interesting one. What do you got?
Jeff
Bears
always talking shit. Bears will always suck. Nice. Thanks, Jeff.
You have Scott Kelvin Banks going to the Niners. Kelvin Banks feels like someone that has had positive helium in the last week or so. Seem like maybe there's some pro Kelvin Banks discussions early in the process, or even like late last, football season. But now we've kind of moved back up. You have him going 11 to the Niners, who I think are also another team that positionally are pretty fluid. They could use an edge, they could use a corner. They obviously could use offensive line talent as well.
Yeah, I just think Kelvin Banks is moving up. I think he's kind of solidifying himself to be in that top 15. For me, it's hard to drop him really past probably Miami here. I just think he's getting too much buzz. I think teams like what he brings to the table and a little bit of versatility to be able to move him inside to guard if they wanted to. And then specifically when we look at the 49ers, like they need offensive line help. Trent Williams has been a stalwart in the league for years. He's getting up in age, and they just need something else besides him. And I think Kelvin Banks is a possible player that they could play at one position, and then if Williams gets hurt, or if he decides to retire or hold out, because he's had some contract discussions as well. I think he would be versatile enough for them to move around, and I think teams are going to grade him a little bit higher than what us is kind of doing mock drafts probably will.
Yeah, Connor, any additional thoughts on the Niners? And those one we kind of went back and forth a little bit last time we talked. Let me see price wise right now. Offensive line, first position drafted for the Niners, plus 190 on FanDuel. D line plus 210, and then Caesars has corner all the way out to 4-1.
Interesting. Yeah. So, I mean, every year there's always a couple of randos on Twitter that I like to follow that like are just different per team. And sometimes they pan out. Sometimes they're just like the worst sources ever. So, take this with a grain of salt, but they've also led to some like massive wins, cause like sometimes randos know stuff, but anyways, so this guy on Twitter, his name's Lobs All Day, Lobs_all_day, said, source told me 49ers are extremely high on Kelvin Banks Jr. So much so these are number one ranked offensive tackle in this draft class. Take that for what you will. And he prefaced it with saying 49ers are taking him. The same guy told me about Pearsall last year, and I didn't believe him. So this is very much a trust me, bro. I know, but I thought it was interesting. And it was also like confirmation bias, kind of where I was already trending anyways, with like Kelvin Banks kind of moving up draft board. Like 49ers need an offensive lineman. I think you'd be a good fit there. So I don't know. Lobs all day. You're on the chopping block. This is your time. If it's not, if he said Kelvin Banks or Will Johnson, if it's not what Kelvin Banks or Will Johnson, you're going to the shadow realm like all the rest of the randos if you're wrong. So,
yeah, this is a great feature, using like the search engine of Twitter. This is how I landed on the dad of the girl that rear-ended Ted McMillan's brother's car. And then he said that he asked the brother, and the Raiders have showed the most interest in Ted. So like you just never know. Like you start digging in a little bit, like okay, make a note of that. See if there's anything to that. So you just the randos are this time of year they don't even know what they're reporting. They don't even know that they're reporting, right? They're just sharing some information that they got. So apparently Tet's brother, ran into this young girl's car, and they started talking. So just putting that out there. Ted McMillan to the Raiders based off of that small minor car accident there in Arizona. So. All right, Scott, Dallas, more drumbeat on wide receiver. You have Matthew Golden landing there, staying in Texas. Any thoughts on Dallas?
Yeah, they just scheduled a meeting with him. I think he might be actually doing a top 30 visit today, maybe. So Dallas is known for meeting with a lot of the picks that they're considering here in the first round. So that makes a lot of sense. I know they showed up and did a local workout with him as well. So I just think he's there in their backyard. He's a need. We've talked about and heard a little bit of Tet kind of moving down and having some issues, but I just think he's a better fit. Now, one thing I will say is that Dallas has met with a handful, pretty much all the top wide receivers here. So they've shown Tet some love as well, with a lot of the meetings and stuff that they had. But I just tend to think that the deep threat and the speed of Golden is going to reign supreme. And it's not a good look for some of the stuff that's come out on Tet with him not loving football, him not watching film, and some of the other stuff. And it's things like that. When you see it and hear it directly out of the player's mouth, I think that's going to turn heads a little bit for some players and some teams, I think, as far as like selecting Tet. And, look, you've got guys. I value Steve Smith breaking down wide receivers, and he's got Matthew Golden as his top wide receiver in this draft, excluding Travis Hunter. So I think you'll probably see some front offices kind of view things the same way.
Some other ball knowers, Brett Coleman, one of them, touched on, even though we have Golden running a 4.29, he wasn't really used that way much at Texas. I guess on the tape is not much of a field stretching presence, especially in comparison to a guy like Ted McMillan, which is very interesting to me. Connor, I know there's, definitely a pro Ted Hive and definitely feels like a louder anti Ted Hive, which is interesting. Any thoughts on, what you've heard in the last week or so, or anything on the Golden Tet Dallas situation?
I think it's just like a coin toss. So I don't know. That's kind of how I thought it's like the whole time, basically. And I don't think that was necessarily reflected in the market initially. I just think it's like 50-50. I could see either of them going in like the 12 to 25-ish range, to be honest, just based on because they're just very different players. So it's going to be whatever flavor that team wants and decides they need. 13 now with, the Dolphins with Tyreek Hill potentially, his whole thing up in the air. Like they're probably in some play for wide receiver. Could they want Matthew Golden? Could they want Ted McMillan? I don't know. I think that there's a lot of other teams that are in play for wide receivers. I'm not necessarily sure which is for which. And then I think what's to Scott's point of he said that he doesn't love football. I don't know if that matters as much personally, but I think that teams might think that matters a lot, or so that might turn some football guys off a good bit. Again, if it's even causing a little bit of rumbling for us, and I feel like we're pretty, I don't know, well-centered people for the most part. The football guys are going to be real pissed off with something like that.
Yeah, I also feel like it was a little taken out of context. It was I don't like watching, not watching tape extra. He's not watching extra tape. He's not at home watching tape. We know we're going to watch it with the team. He was I don't know. It was like eating a bowl of cereal. He was just I don't know. It didn't feel like a super serious answer that he thought maybe would even be circulated, which I thought was pretty interesting too. But definitely want to continue to monitor that, because you see him going to 12, and then you definitely have some other folks that are dropping into that late 20s range where you start to see kind of the next group of wide receivers coming off the board. Miami's interesting. Obviously, we know Armstead retiring. I don't think that they were surprised by that, but it's a team that could use offensive line talent. They could use a wide receiver maybe now too, based off of the Tyreek Hill news. Safety is an area of need for them as well. Scott, you went with Starks, Malachi Starks, first safety off the board here as a fit for Miami. Obviously, you had this in before any of that news. Any thoughts on expanding on Miami?
Yeah, I actually think this is kind of the floor for Kelvin Banks. Miami is a team that I struggled to kind of project this go around, because I just think they have a lot of holes that they need to go ahead and fill. I went with Starks because he's been raved about as far as like what he brings to the table. I think he's been kind of projected a little bit low here, but you look at Miami and they've shown a lot of interest in the other safety from South Carolina as well. So I think with the defense and some of the stuff they need, I just kind of landed on Malachi Starks because I struggle to really find other places, maybe Minnesota and a couple other teams. So sometimes it's just when you struggle to really find a fit, you kind of slot a player that you feel comfortable with going in the first round to a team that kind of has a need. But that was just kind of where I landed. I don't have a ton of insight on Miami this year. I just think they have a ton of needs, and I think offensive line could be another one. It's just trying to slot a player there.
Yeah, is a tricky one for sure. Connor, Colts 14. Scott has Tyler Warren going there. Obviously, tight end is, I think, probably one of the more common mock positions. I even think you have to lay a little bit to take Colts to take a tight end, or like it's right around there at that point. Not a team that has like just one need, which is obviously interesting too in terms of trying to play off of some market uncertainty. The market feels pretty certain that the Colts are going that way. Any thoughts on where they're at when you've been mocking? Have you given consideration to other positions other than tight end?
No, but I probably should. I feel like Colston Loveland, though, is just, I feel like he's getting more and more hype the more we go into it. There's just not necessarily like a spot that makes sense for him outside of the Colts. And then it's like a little bit of a dead range, I think, for him. So it's kind of tough because I think that he's a very good player, and like people are like constantly hyping him up, even having him ranked over Tyler Warren. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him go significantly higher. And like, again, 14, someone even had him 7th in there, which would be crazy. But yeah, I don't know. I think that I probably need to dive in deeper to the Colts because I think that tight end being chalk, I'm not sure that fully, I mean, it makes sense. I'm just not sure it should be as chalky as it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It feels kind of like the safety situation where you have two real clear guys definitely going, feels like for the most part, going in the first round. Tight end, I would say so, maybe even more so than safety, but just stylistically could not be more different in terms of how you want to utilize that position schematically. So I think Warren can do it all. He's probably maybe a little less of a dynamic receiver than Colston Loveland, but probably pretty close. Whereas Loveland's very much, like I said, big slot. And same thing with the safety, is more of a free safety, box safety, strong safety situation with those two guys too. So it becomes pretty interesting in terms of like not just team need or positional need. It becomes a little bit more fit piece of it too, which I think is the struggle of what we're trying to do here. Falcons seem to me like a great spot for edge. Feel like we've all kind of been mocking that. And again, now you're basically minus 150 or so, Scott, for Falcons to draft a edge rusher, defensive lineman. You went with Mikael Williams here from Georgia. Any thoughts on veering off of defensive line for the Falcons?
No, not for me. And I specifically like the fit with Williams there. He's right there in the backyard at Georgia, starting the SEC at the age of 18. I think when you start looking at Raheem Morris, he's a coach that could probably help develop him and get the most out of him. I think the upside is there for Mikael Williams, and I just think Atlanta would be a perfect fit for him.
Connor, I thought 16 was going to be the absolute floor for Jahad Campbell. We've had some Jahad Campbell labrum issues in terms of, hasn't really been able to kind of let it fly through the whole pre-draft process. We're seeing some people talk about him falling all the way out of the first round. What are your thoughts around the Cardinals? What are your thoughts on Jahad Campbell, or anything to expand on at 16?
Yeah, the Cardinals just have a lot of needs. So they've been mocked. Yeah, Campbell, Barron, Golden. I think I had Derek Harmon. I think it could really be all over the place here. I don't honestly have too much of a take on the Cardinals. I think they just start like the point of the draft where maybe I'll have like 2 to 3 takes where I'm like, oh, this feels pretty good. And the rest are kind of like just piecing stuff together based on like random breadcrumbs that we can get in hopes of the best.
For sure. It's just not a great, again, not a great pass rush. And it's not a great off-ball linebacker room. So again, the guy like Campbell who can bring that second level pressure, it feels like just a nice chess piece for them. Scott, any thoughts on what you're doing here with the Cardinals? You went with Barron at corner, which I think, again, another need for them, and they could definitely use another outside corner.
Yeah, for me, it's really between kind of Barron and Campbell's dealing with injury. You start to hear a little bit from some other people that break down film that Barron's maybe not as high as what some other people think. I think even Daniel Jeremiah hinted that he thinks he might fall down into the 20s as well. And, aside from that, you start looking at maybe some of the defensive linemen here. I just think there's a lot that when you look at that Cardinals defense that they need to improve. So I just kind of went with my top rated player in Barron, who I think makes sense as far as a fit. But, when you start looking at Campbell, I think it's a slot there where we talked about it a little bit before the show. I think 16 here to the Cardinals, 19 is where I ended up landing Campbell to the Bucks. I think either of these positions would make sense for him. And I haven't heard major concern about Campbell missing time going into the season due to this injury. I think it's something that, from what I understand, is recovering well. So I still think you're going to have some teams that shy away. We don't have access to medicals and really know how teams deal with that a lot of the time. So I kind of edge on a side of caution and go with the healthy player here.
Yeah, I only get more of a sense on where teams see Barron, because I know, again, last week Solak was talking about Barron. Didn't think Barron can go this high because he thinks Barron is a nickel, right? He thinks Barron is a slot corner. Really, one of the only good thing. I mean, Budda Baker is an absolute baller. Garrett Williams is a really good young slot corner they drafted in the 2023 draft, who they like a lot. They like a lot and has been really good when he's been on the field. So in terms of like their needs, they need a perimeter corner, if anything. So that'd be an interesting switch if maybe Will Johnson fell versus Barron being a specific to the Cardinals. All right. Sake of time, let's just kind of jump around here in the back half of the draft. We typically do this. Poor teams in the back half don't get quite as much time, but is there, any sort of team fit, player that's trending, any situation here? Connor, we can bounce back and forth here in kind of the back half of the first round here. I guess we can kind of hang out in the high teens, low 20s here to start.
Yeah, I think that Omarion Hampton to the Broncos is gaining a ton of steam. I mean, that's like one of the most popularly mocked picks right now. And I think for good reason. It makes sense from, a variety of standpoints. They've been talking about like wanting a joker. Omarion Hampton, just like an explosive player that can immediately help this offense. They talked about adding a running back for sure in the draft. They like openly admitted that. Now, I think that Travion Henderson could also be in play as well at pick 20 if Hampton's gone, or even instead of Hampton. Like, I think they could prefer one or the other. And in that case, Hampton probably goes the next, 3-4 picks after, because you're looking at, the Broncos want a running back, the Steelers want a running back, the Chargers want a running back. Like that little range there, I think that at least 2 running backs could go. This is a good running back class. I wouldn't be surprised to see, 3+ running backs in this first round here. So, Omarion Hampton, I think at 20 makes a ton of sense. And when I've heard it, like, they like him. So I think that's a good spot to have. Now, I don't know if he goes any higher than that, though. That's like the thing. It says over under is 19.5, like minus 140 over, or no, minus 140 under, plus 110 over. But like, who is going to take him before that besides the Bears?
I could name one team.
Yeah.
So there's somebody I know who knows Sean Payton personally. And so this is just throwing one of those things out there.
Yeah.
Supposedly spoke with him a week ago and said that they love Omarion Hampton, and that he thinks he's the next Deuce McAllister. He's compared him, and thinks very highly of him. The other nugget that was thrown out in that conversation is that they want him very badly, that they're not covering it up, but they have concerns specifically about the Chargers possibly moving up ahead of them to take Omarion Hampton. That was one of the concerns, and just a little nugget that I've heard from somebody here locally. There's been some other buzz. It's not a secret at this point connecting Omarion Hampton to Denver. You'll see that probably in multiple mocks. I think the local guys there in Denver are all saying the same. So there's a lot of smoke and fire there towards connecting Hampton with Denver. It's just, is Hampton going to go ahead and make it down there? And if he doesn't make it down there, then I think you do see Travion Henderson and maybe a little bit of a trade back, a couple of spots. And I think he comes into play for Denver.
That's a tough way to gauge things. Like if you're like, oh, a team behind me is going to move up in front of me. It's not even like I need to move up in front of this team. It's like, oh, I'm worried about the Chargers moving up in front of us. So then we have to move up preemptively. Interestingly enough, that if they're worried about that. So last year, if you go back to the Bo Nix scenario, I think were shitting their pants that the Raiders or someone else was going to move up after them. And they came out that I think if Sean Payton was like, oh, we played Minnesota so bad, or we played someone else so bad that like, we actually didn't want JJ McCarthy. We wanted Bo Nix all along. I have a feeling that they're probably just going to stand pat and just hold out like they did for their quarterback. If they did with their quarterback, then they can do it with the running back. But maybe it's not Omari and Hampton that they want. Maybe it's Travion Henderson. Maybe they're just leaking as much Hampton as they want just to get Henderson. That wouldn't be surprising either. But either way, I think that they take some kind of skill player here because they need some more juice on that offense.
The one thing I will note when it comes to Sean Payton is that he's notorious for running his mouth prior to the draft. In certain circles. And it's easy to sit there and say, well, last year they did this with Bo Nix, but they also sat tight, and it was well known that when Mahomes was coming out down here in New Orleans, that they were interested in getting Mahomes, and they ended up going ahead and sitting tight, and Kansas City kind of jumped them. So they've made moves when he was here with New Orleans to trade up and get players. But also when you look at running back, he kind of sat tight and got Alvin Kamara, later. So he's got some history of doing both things, but I think it is malpractice to move up to get a running back. So I think you need to, you're probably right. They do go ahead. I don't think that they move up to get him. Maybe another team does, or maybe another team takes Hampton, but I think both Hampton and Travion Henderson will be in play for Denver when it comes draft day.
Yeah, a lot of good Travion Henderson steam. We just, before we went live, we're talking about betting over 2.5 running backs in the first round because it was hanging out at plus 240. Some of that continued to steam. Brian jumped in the chat and was talking about it too. We were trying to hold off to the end of the show, but we just pushed that out as well because it started to steam to plus 175 or so. So I don't know where it stands now, but we definitely feel pretty good about there being enough outs towards the back end of having, Hampton and Henderson here in the back of this first round. So still plus money, probably a pretty good bet if you're looking to get down on something now. Yeah, it could be. I mean, I can't even find second running back off the board right now. I'm just trying to look at a couple different spots. Maybe they pulled it.
I don't even know if that's a market, to be honest. I don't know.
I think it was. Yeah,
it? Okay.
Maybe not, but I thought it was. But all right. Yeah, the Chargers are interesting. Chargers moving up to get a running back would be really peculiar too. I mean, they signed Najee Harris. They have wide receiver needs. They have interior defensive line needs. They could be a really busy team, but for them to move up could be pretty interesting. I see you did go with Shedeur Stewart, Green Bay. Any thought on Green Bay with corner, Scott? Or I think Stewart's a great fit there as well. With maybe some discussion around Jair Alexander moving on somewhere else in the trade.
Yeah, I think they're definitely in play for a corner. I just tend to think that they're more of a traits-based team whenever they're drafting. I think
for sure
you really have to look at what corners are available here. I don't see them necessarily reaching for a corner if you've got Barron and Will Johnson both off the board. So I tend to lean a little bit more towards the edge. You kind of want to figure out where to slot Shedeur Stewart. I think we talked about it a couple weeks ago when we did our live mock, and I just think he's a player that makes sense for them. I know they've met with James Pierce, but it's interesting when you're looking at the edge rushers that are left here in the back part. You've got James Pierce and Mike Green that both have some off the field concerns as far as, is that going to push them back? And you've got Shedeur Stewart, who doesn't necessarily have off the field concerns, but has production concerns that, when you're trying to match his measurables to what he did at the combine, where he just blew it away. Is he a Olympic athlete who is trying to play football? It's you've got some concerns about getting the most out of him, but you look at Green Bay and they're a team that likes players that perform well at the combine. So I kind of think he's a good fit there for Green Bay over what some of the other cornerback and secondary options are.
You brought Luther Burden back into the first round. That's someone that I think early in the process people thought would be in the first round. Seemed to be sliding. That there was necessarily any poor reporting per se. I mean, there was some not a great locker room guy. But what happened with Luther Burden that made you want to bring him back in?
I just like the fit, man. I really like the fit there with the Rams. Put him in the Cooper Kupp role. Roll out with Devontae Adams and Puka, and I think you could really cause some problems. I think when you look at McVay and what he does, he has a very specific vision for players when they draft them, and look, the Rams front office, they haven't had first round picks for a while, but they've killed it whenever they've gotten it. Last year with Verse, a couple years ago getting Puka, like they usually, if they have a fit and they have a specific player, they usually hit. So it's just really taking a shot. You won't see, I think Burden's, like you said, a player that's kind of fallen out of most mocks in the first round. There are some advanced analytic issues where, him catching a lot of balls. I think 75% of the balls are within, 10 yards or so. But you start to look at what Cooper Kupp did and how he was able to uncover out of the slot and some of the other stuff. I think McVay could have a very good vision for how he would want to use a player like Burden.
Plus 850 on FanDuel for first position drafted for the Rams being wide receiver. So, well, worth a sprinkle maybe. Connor, anything else in back end here? The team, player, someone on the rise, any matchups that you like?
Yeah, something that I played personally that was, just no one would play it on our Discord because it's too ridiculous. I played under 4.5 cornerbacks at minus 200, and that's up to minus 280. I think this should be like minus 500 because so it includes Hunter. So you're talking about Hunter, Barron, Will Johnson, and then you need both of Hairston and Trey Amos to be in. You need both of them. So like with probably, I guess this is the next conversation, with Jackson Dart, with Jalen Milroe, with Travion Henderson, probably all getting into the first round. Not probably. Travion Henderson, probably. Jalen Milroe, there's way more hype for it now. Like some of these guys are going to get pushed out. It's just going to, some of these guys are going to, so you're talking about Maxwell Harrison. Yeah, he ran super fast. Yes, I do think a team in the maybe late 20s is going to pick him. There's also rumors. Daniel Jeremiah said Jahdae Barron's like going to be a mid 20s guy, and some teams have him as a second rounder. Like that was like, they said he's just like a mid. He said he loves him, but he said all the teams he talks to are like, yeah, he's like going to be around in the 20s. So that again pushes all these guys even more down. So yeah, I think under 4.5 corners is like a good bit short, even at current price. Again, it's not a bet for everyone. No one likes that kind of shit. But if you have the bankroll and you can get down on it, like I think it's a good bet.
Yeah. And another thing is looking at like evaluations for corners. Shavon Revel Jr. is a cornerback that a lot of people were high on as far as his play and his development, but he got hurt. He's been killing it on the top 30 circuit, meeting with teams because he hasn't been able to work out. But he's a player that if he didn't have an injury, he'd be considered here in the first round. But because of his injury status, I don't think he goes anywhere in the first round. And my understanding is that a lot and the majority of teams have him higher than Hairston and Amos and some of these other cornerbacks that you start to consider there in the first round.
Okay. Yeah, in terms of outs that are really clean on the board, it feels like the Rams would kind of need to be one of those corner outs. Right? If the Rams went and deviated and didn't take a corner, I definitely agree that like you're going to want to have that under 4.5 corner ticket. It could still land under anyway. I did bet myself personally at like plus 350 Buffalo to take a corner at 30. I think it's kind of right around there, 320 or so now. So we didn't massively move the market, but it definitely think it's a good look for the Bills as well. But I think you make a good point. There's maybe some more variance on Barron, depending on if anyone sees him outside of just being a nickel. That makes it a little bit trickier, but the teams do. It's really hard to take a nickel, in the teens or, inside that position. So yeah, probably a pretty good look. Who else? Anyone else that's kind of steaming? Josh Simons is a guy that people loved. Knee injury issues. Feels like there's been better Josh Simons stuff as of late. Feels like he's kind of moving in closer to the back end of first rounds more frequently. Scott, you have him going 31st to Kansas City, which would be, I think, a home run pick for them. Make a ton of sense. I've seen some discussion on running back spot there as well, which would be very, very peculiar. They've done that before with not a lot of success. So I don't know if that would make them pause at all. But I guess anything here in the final stretch of 6-7 teams there, Connor.
I did want to. Well, I think we need to have the Jalen Milroe discourse.
Yeah,
sure. Are you guys buying? So the NFL announced earlier this year that they were going to limit the amount of teams or players that they're inviting to the combine to avoid like the draft day. Player sitting in the green room by himself, looking sad, like pouting. The whole draft day experience. And then they go ahead and they invite Jalen Milroe, who accepts an invite to the first round, or to the event. in my opinion, that's some signal that teams like him. People have mocked him to Pittsburgh. People have said that Pittsburgh loves him and would take him at 21. There's no way to really bet that right now outside of like Pittsburgh take a quarterback, which is like plus 300. I don't know. I mean, like to me that there's got to be some signal there with it. So I think that he probably sees it in the first round. I don't know if I want to bet it. I don't want to lay the juice on over 2.5 quarterbacks like minus 300 right now. But there's a lot of outs to win that as it stands right now.
I struggle getting Milroe into the first round.
I do too.
You know, it's like you said, like I've heard some of the same rumors from, you know, football boards, random Twitter guys that, you know, and a couple of podcasts that Milroe is in consideration there for Pittsburgh, but we don't know what's going to happen with Shedeur Sanders. So does Shedeur Sanders fall to that 21 spot? You know, if he makes it past, you know, a couple of other teams that we talked about, would they pick Shedeur over Milroe? You know, is that a situation? I think the issue comes down to what you saw last year out of Milroe passing. It just looks and seemed like he lost confidence in passing. Even when he went to the Senior Bowl, he really just didn't throw the ball well, didn't take shots down the field. When, you know, 2 years ago, when he's at his peak, you know, he's probably better than most of the other quarterbacks in this draft. He just hasn't been there for a while. And I don't know how a team is going to evaluate him, and especially a team like Pittsburgh who needs somebody to play now. I just look at Milroe more of a little bit of a developmental player that might take 2 years. And I don't see, you know, a team really reaching for him in the first round, even with the physical tools that he has.
Yeah, they don't have a long-term answer at quarterback though, but right now, and this is I don't even know what it was, but it's definitely, I'm sure, shrunk over the last week or so. Milroe 10-1, second quarterback off the board, right? That would have to be the only way you can kind of bet into this, and it's not even like a clean way to bet into this, right? You're talking about him going, you know, ahead of Shedeur and Jackson Dart, but that's not even really what this implies specifically. So, not a great betting opportunity currently to speculate on.
That was 80-1, by the way, like 4 days ago. So I don't, yeah, I mean, I'm not betting 10-1 on second quarterback.
A better bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine. 80-1, that's fine. But 10-1, no thanks.
Yeah. All right, gents. Yeah, that's all I got. I shared Buffalo. I think corner is a great spot for them based off of price currently. There's more talk about Philly taking a tight end, but not necessarily Colston Loveland. But Scott has Colston Loveland going all the way down there. That seems pretty interesting. What are the Eagles' first position drafted numbers on tight end? It feels like it gets really tricky first position drafted stuff when you're talking about really like the 30s, late 20s, because again, so much can happen. But plus 950 on FanDuel tight end first position drafted for the Eagles. So probably not a bad sprinkle, to be honest. So, Scott, anything else for the people?
No, not much. I mean, really just trying to get through some of the meetings. I updated my board today as far as like top 30 visits and tracking some of it down. And I think really this is where I start to kind of hone in. And when you start to see certain teams doing multiple visits at one position group, you can kind of start narrowing down where you're going to go as far as your mock drafts, as far as like a position team match. So that's really where I'm kind of looking at right now. You know, teams like the Texans, I like the Texans to really reach and get an offensive line, whether that's interior or a tackle. I think they're going to go ahead and do some of that. That's something that makes sense. I like the fit with Tyler Booker there. And like I said, really it's just tracking down some of the latest information, going into down some rabbit holes on Twitter or X and some other places, and you know, seeing who's gotten into a little fender bender that we can find some information from.
You never know, buddy. I just got to use that search feature. It came back. It was dead for a little bit. I think the search feature, especially on desktop, you can go into the advanced settings and you can really start to use it. You never know. You can find out about car accidents and draft visits. So, Connor, anything else? People can head over to the site 44.com, check out your mock draft 3, along with obviously Scott's 2.0. You got anything for the people?
Yeah, we're going to be releasing some more bets. I got a bunch cooked up, just kind of letting the markets marinate for a little bit longer. And then we have, you know, I think 3 or 4 that are pretty solid coming out. So we're going to release a bunch more bets and, yeah, get rich. I'm feeling good about this year. I feel like we're in a good spot.
Let Connor cook. It's going to be good. So we'll ramp up here as we get closer. So move the line wherever you listen to podcasts. 4 for 4 bets on the YouTube channel. Subscribe so you don't miss any of that. Again, we'll be back next week as well. Again, continue to expand on this process. Hopefully talk some more markets, see what shifted. Because we know we'll probably have a lot of news between now and then. We'll also have a Masters champion. So go enjoy the golf this weekend, people. For Connor and Scott, I'm Ryan. We'll see you all next time. Thanks for watching.